Are you in your offices in Florida or on the road somewhere?
In the offices in Florida today.
Okay, good. All right, so much going on, especially with the High Court. Now the High Court's back in session.
Yes.
They're taking up a case related to abortion. Tell us about it.
That's right. Yes, and this is a case similar to the previous abortion case they heard in 2016. It has to do with state laws that require abortionists to have hospital admitting privileges in nearby hospitals. Now, 3 years ago, they struck down a law like that in Texas. And sadly, even though the state of Texas said, look, this is necessary for the health of the women in our state that go to get abortions, the court did not give deference to the folks right there on the scene who know a little bit about what's going on in Texas, but rather made the argument that said, well, look, if we hold these abortion clinics to these standards and these abortionists to these requirements, they're going to go out of business, and then women won't be able to get abortions, or it'll be too difficult, or they'll have to travel too far, and therefore we have to let these places stay open. In other words, what they're saying is, let's let these places stay open with substandard standards and substandard doctors, simply because we have to make abortion readily available, and, never mind about the health and well-being of these women or the quality of their care. The state of Louisiana now has said the same thing. They said, we need these regulations because, for example, if a complication develops in the abortion facility, as they often do, complications happen more than we know, and this woman has to be taken to a hospital, well, doesn't it make sense that this doctor who's caring for her, of course, when we use those words with a grain of salt because they don't deserve the title doctor and it's not care. But the point is that the abortionist, if he or she doesn't even have hospital admitting privileges in the hospital where she's about to be taken, so there's obviously then a discontinuity of care and an unaccountability on the part of the abortionist. Now, the doctor at the emergency room is going to say, well, what was her condition just now and what was done and how did this emergency arise, et cetera, et cetera. The abortionist is supposed to be able to answer those questions. You know what this reveals? It reveals what we've always said, that the abortionists are the losers and washouts of the medical profession. They are at the lowest rung of the ladder. They don't even deserve the title doctor. And, now hopefully the Supreme Court will look at this and will say, yes, it is reasonable for the states to pass these kinds of laws if they deem it necessary. So that's where we're at with this case. So what happens
right now if they don't have admitting privileges? If someone is going to an emergency after a botched abortion, what happens at the hospital then?
The hospital has to just take it up from ground zero, and they say, okay, they try to assess the situation right then and there in whatever emergency is happening. They don't necessarily know any of the background. And the sad thing is, neither does the abortionist. The other side uses this slogan that abortion is supposed to be between a woman and her physician. But that's contrary to fact because it's not her physician that's doing the abortion. It's a stranger. And the other problem is that these abortion facilities do not, for the most part, adequately assess what's the medical condition of that woman going in.
So if they had admitting privileges, what would that look like? How would that be? Just so I understand this and people understand it, because this argument's going to come up in conversation.
First of all, right. Well, the first thing is the hospital obviously is going to have its own standards, right? Part of the problem with abortion is that it's an unregulated industry and it takes place in these freestanding abortion facilities. Abortions don't usually happen in hospitals. Hospitals tend to have higher standards. So they are going to, first of all, by having this requirement, it would first of all increase the scrutiny on these abortionists and require them to live up to some higher medical standards than they currently do. Right. Secondly, therefore, it would assure some kind of continuity that the hospital now, this woman being brought to the emergency room, can be under the, again, I hesitate to use the word care, but the abortionist would then be able to say, okay, here's what just happened, but without any privileges at that hospital, then it's a disconnect. So that's one of the arguments.
He's going to be consulting with the hospital as
yes.
For example, when my mom went into emergency when she broke her leg, her physician and her ortho guy were able to consult with the hospital because they had the admitting privileges there. I get it. Okay,
right.
I just wanted to make sure I was understanding it. So here's the thing. Okay, so this is like standard operating procedure in any other type of a medical condition. I just use my mom as an example because she had a severe fall, and her doctors were all consulting, came to the hospital to see her. So what's the big deal? Why can't you get that done?
Yeah,
right?
And the problem that the abortion industry has, as they even admit, if this law went into effect, we wouldn't be able to function. And that should tell us something. An alarm should go off in our head. Instead of jumping to the argument.
Why shouldn't they be able to function if they're all about health? Why wouldn't they put this basic stipulation in there?
That's right, and it reveals that they're not. It reveals the dirty secret about the abortion industry is that this is not being done in any kind of respectable healthcare manner. Our friends over at Americans United for Life issued a report a couple of years ago called Unsafe.
Right, I remember that, yeah.
And the Unsafe report revealed some 1,400 violations in abortion facilities in 32 states. When we talk about violations, here's some of the things that were most common. A failure to observe a patient's vital signs. Expired medications, untrained staff, improper and inadequate record keeping. Who wants to, get, quote, health care in a place where there are these substandard conditions and these various violations? People hear about, horror stories like Kermit Gosnell or this abortionist Cloffer in Illinois where the bodies of those babies were found. And they tend to think, these are just, and the other side tries to say, these are just exceptional, out of the ordinary cases. But reports like Unsafe, when you're talking about abortion facilities in 32 states, hundreds of abortion facilities having these violations, and these are recently discovered violations, you realize that this is a characteristic of the abortion industry. Why is it that the abortion industry that claims to be caring about the health of women consistently oppose us? Even to the point, remember, it was the abortionists that appealed this thing to the Supreme Court that the court just recently accepted to hear. That was an appeal from the abortionists. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals that takes care of Louisiana, where this case arose, actually upheld the law. They upheld the law. And so now it's the abortionists. So they're willing to go all the way to the Supreme Court to strike down these laws that states like Louisiana are saying are necessary for the health and safety of women. So this is good for us in that sense, that it is exposing, in fact, in real time, what we've always said, that the other side is just, they don't care about the health and safety of women any more than they care about the babies that they kill.
Yeah, and it also shows how emboldened they are in terms of they don't care. They're going all the way to the Supreme Court to do what they want to do, and this is all, I think the bottom line is about money. We're chatting with Father Frank Pavone, National Director of Priests for Life. If you have a question, the phone number is 877-573-7825. Father, could it be that they don't want this in place is because most of these abortionists at these freestanding facilities go from place to place and state to state?
Well, that's part of the problem too. They're finding it harder and harder to find abortionists, and of course that's a very good sign. There's a real, and this has been a problem for them for decades. This is not a recent problem. There's a turnoff in the medical profession to abortion. So yes, some of these are we call them circuit rider abortionists. They travel, they'll fly into a state, do their dirty work for a day or two, and then fly off to a different state. And and of course then it causes a practical problem for them if they had to abide by this requirement.
So, Father, you're always telling us to raise questions when we get into discussions about people. The media are presenting this as, we're the crazy ones. We're the ones who are wanting to put all these different quote-unquote restrictions to oppress the abortion industry. I think the question would be to say, okay, if you have the emergency situation, I could use my mother as an example because she's been in and out of emergency and rehab this whole summer. It's been crazy. Every single time, her physician, her doctor, has been there to say, okay, let's do this time, let's do this, let's consult with the orthopedic specialist. And so there's been a continuance of care that I can consult with her doctors.
Well, it's like
what is the best recourse for my mom? And so this is just with broken bones. We're not talking about something. I mean, it's serious, but think about abortion and the procedure that's done.
Well, and you have. I mean, if you put yourself under the care of a doctor for a particular procedure, and something goes wrong, and they say to you, "Well, how's the conversation going to go?" They're going to say to you, "Okay, we're going to send you over to the hospital now." And don't you want to hear words like, "I'll meet you over there"? I'll be there. You're going to go in the and then I'll meet you over in the emergency room.
Right.
That's comforting to a certain extent. It says, okay, you because you know what just happened. But no, there's that. It's just terrible. Well, of course, in these abortion facilities, I mean, we hear the stories all the time from the women of Silent No More that the abortionist never exchange a single word with them.
No, he shows up, does the abortion, and leaves.
And goes away, and they don't even know his name most of the time, his or her name. It's terrible. And we do have to help people pay attention to the fact of how unregulated this abortion industry is, how much malpractice there is. It goes back to what I always say: you can't practice vice virtuously. If you're able to go in there and tear a baby apart, you don't care about medical record keeping. You don't care about standards, expirations on the medication or training your staff. You don't care about anything because it distorts the conscience. It deadens the soul, and this is what we're dealing with now. There's a chance, therefore, that the High Court will use this as an opportunity to reevaluate its decision from a few years ago because, when they use this undue burden standard and when they say, well, the effect of this law is that there's going to be fewer abortion clinics, we should be saying, well, so what? It's not saying that the clinics can't exist. It's just saying they have to have certain health and safety standards. But if we get to the point of saying, it doesn't matter, well, then why would you want to go there in the first place?
That would never be acceptable for an OBGYN's office in general, or a dentist's office in general, or any other, any type of a heart doctor, a cardiologist's office, any type of specialist would never be allowed to operate like that, except in the abortion industry.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. It's the abortion distortion. All the rules change when it comes to killing the babies.
Let me ask you before we let you go on this Wednesday, lots of discussion about what's happening in Rome with the Amazon Synod. What are your thoughts? And I think there's a lot of confusion out there. What can you share?
My thoughts are, God help us. God is not a God of confusion.
Confusion. Right.
And that's all I see coming out of here so far is confusion. And it's just, we have to keep focused on one thing. And this is the phrase, I think, that it really is the anchor amidst all this confusion under this papacy. And it is, what has the church always taught? That's not a secret. That's not going to change. What has the church always taught? That needs to be our focus. And if a synod or anything that we do in the church, any kind of meeting, any kind of document, doesn't reinforce what the church has always taught and make it clearer, not more obscure, then what are we doing? We're not doing our job. So we have to keep focused on that. Let's wait and see after however long it's going to take what kind of document comes out of the synod. But, no kind of document coming out of the synod can change church teaching. What the church has always taught is exactly what will always be true. And we just have to keep focused on that.
What about this issue of discussing married priests? How far do you think that will go?
To me, it's a waste of time. It's a side issue. It's that's not going to. If people think that's going to solve the shortage of priesthood, think again, because it doesn't take any less faith to make the step of becoming a priest, and it's a crisis of faith and of understanding the gospel that suppresses vocations. Not, oh, I can't get married. I mean, those of us that embrace the priesthood, we joyfully embrace celibacy because it's an embrace of Christ. It's an embrace of the kingdom, like Jesus himself said and practiced in his own life. It's an embrace of the kingdom, and why? I mean, we do already have married priests. We know that in the Eastern Rites and even in the Latin Church by certain exceptions, and
right.
So it is something that exists. But to change outright, the discipline of celibacy, we're not talking about a small thing there. And any discussion I have about that, when people ask me over all these years, it is a discussion where I'm always the one that has to bring up the faith dimension, the reality of embracing the kingdom of God and expanding your heart. I think of my own vocation. One of the moments when it became clear to me that I wanted to become a priest, I was sitting at a boardwalk and I saw a young family go by. Mom, dad, they were pushing a baby carriage. And that's beautiful, and we believe in that, and we promote that. But something else came to my mind at that moment, and I realized, that I wasn't being called to devote my heart exclusively to a wife and children. At that moment, it was like God clarified for me, I'm giving you a heart for all the world. I want you to be of service to the whole.
And you're married. A priest is married to the church.
Yeah, yeah. There's that positive sense of the gift of service to all God's people in a very radical way, to the point that you sacrifice marriage. And, I'm always the one that has to bring this up, that, there's another world awaiting us. There is a life beyond. There is a kingdom beyond, which has already broken into our own history and has taken the kingdom. It's like the kingdom has captivated us and captivated our hearts. And therefore some, not all, some are called to give that witness, that otherworldly witness of celibacy for the sake of the kingdom. Strangely, every time this question comes up, it's never the questioner that's raising that point. And that says, and it'd be interesting to see in this synod now, if to whatever extent that question comes up, and I'm not, involved in any way, shape, or form in any of these deliberations, but if and when that question comes up, let's see how it's asked. Let's see if anyone asking the question says anything about the kingdom of God breaking into this world and a sign of the life to come and union with Christ. Let's just see. I guarantee you it's going to be all, maybe more of these guys will choose the, when people say, more men will choose the priesthood if they're allowed to get married, I there's a dimension of that that's kind of insulting, because it's like, what are you saying about me? Now, I'm a priest, and I chose the priesthood. What do people think? I want to, I want to be able to have the pleasures of this world, as well. I want to be able to have my cake and eat it too. It's almost like it's like a degrading, comment about, what we're capable of or what we're looking for in life. I just find it so ignorant. As you said,
I think it's we do have exceptions in the church, and this with certain priests who are, for example, in different rites or Episcopalian or married and come to the church would get that, the high Anglicans. But here's the thing, Father. Not only that, from a faith perspective, which is key, it's a discipline, as you said. It's not doctrine or dogma, so technically it could change. But the problem I have is that they're not even looking at the practicality of it. Look, Deacon Dom and I were married, right? He's a deacon. Now, we don't have any children, so we're normally very busy. So the adjustment that we've had to make to his busyness at the parish level hasn't been that great. But I know many couples who constantly try to balance this, and their husbands, many wives come to me and saying, he's never home. And we're still trying to figure this out after 6, 7, 8, 10 years of being, a diaconate couple. And I don't see in other churches tons of men running to become pastors, whether it's evangelical, whether it's a high Anglican, whatever. They're not like flocking to the seminaries to become, pastors and run churches, because it's such a huge commitment overall. And then in the church, who's going to pay for it? Nobody thinks about that. Catholics barely
Yes.
tithe.
Yeah.
And so right now we're paying for the housing of one priest. You're going to pay for a family. You're going to pay for a wife. You're going to pay for their schooling. Why aren't these practical things ever talked
That's
about?
right.
Either?
The practical thing about payment and expense, and then the practical thing about availability.
Right, I just said, and I'm married to he's a deacon, and
Yeah.
it's challenging. Not so much for us, but I talk to wives all the time. He's never home. We got
Right.
the kids' games. We got this. We got that. And he's a deacon, not a pastor or a priest.
People are just not. They're just not thinking. It's a very superficial argument. Very superficial. Yeah.
Because nobody wants to dig deep and realize that it's at the end of the day, it's a matter of faith. Father, great discussion.
Okay.
Interested to see what you have to say as we move through this synod in Rome, and we will be covering that with Dr. Matthew Bunson and Joan Lewis in the National Hour. Father Frank Pavone, National Director for Priest for Life. Check out all the great work at Priest for Life and his podcast and all the information that Father offers, priestforlife.org. Thanks, Father. We'll talk next week.
God bless. Okay. Bye now.
And we'll be